something we inherited from the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and maybe it's a British tradition in general. I don't know, because I don't know enough about the Welsh. Judging from what we say about the Welsh and the way we use, the only time we use that word in English or in American English, as in welching on a bet, makes me then wonder. And so I figure it's an Anglo-Saxon thing, this idea of candor, to actually say something even though, like, it's not necessarily, nobody wants to hear it, but there's a way it has to be said. And that there's kind of a number of ways of engaging such like a phenomena or social phenomena. There is the type of, that candor does imply it's not meant to be biting or insulting at its basis, and it has to be said even though there's a negative connotation, possibly. So America and the Anglosphere had its great height of sort of achieving. This you especially get from watching what's called the modernist period in soul music and psychedelia spreading around the world from the Anglosphere, specifically in America. The skinheads being a subculture founded around Motown music. It was only later, during the punk rock era, it becomes associated with something like Oi. Before, the skinheads as a social movement was something that people started to see as a style of dress, starting in about 1964, replacing a look called the Teds, or the Teddy Boys, and the Teddy Boys basically being kind of a form of British greaser look. So the British greaser look of the Teddy Boys gets replaced by a new British look of the working class, the skinheads. And that's about 64, 65. You start seeing it around mostly London. And by 69, it is the look and becomes solidly a look so popular. It still has not left fashion. Doc Martens are a skinhead thing. Cuffed Levi's jeans and the Doc Martens that was inherited by the punks from the skinheads. Checked shirts, a certain style of checked shirts, wearing a dress shirt with jeans, very skinhead. That's a very skinhead kind of thing. And it's also borrowed from some of the necessity of the working class. So the necessities of the working class. So something I was thinking about was the candor, that skinheads were also, one of the things was that they were sort of known for being flippantly candid. This is also something that becomes associated with Greater Appalachia, the whippersnapper, the cracker, or basically joke cracker. There's also the idea of then the candor of then the kind of the blacks of Greater Appalachia, and this sort of, which is something that actually comes out of that culture, because there's different cultures, because there were different fundamentally enclaves of black Americans. So that, say, on the East Coast, it would be a different way of behaving, such that there's even imagery and cinematic imagery and music imagery that talks about sort of the difference between these high posting society black people and somebody more like Otis, who's from the Georgia woods, and he wears broke iron shoes was the term, and overalls. He wears overalls. He's not a cufflinks kind of fellow. And such black people existed all the way back to the early 1900s and late 1800s on the East Coast. Black people who were in professions, but they were rare, like all people who were in the professions, but they existed. So, candor in the Anglosphere world candor is one of the great strengths of the Anglosphere world. And one of the things that is starting to pop up is people are becoming more candid. And so one of the things that I actually had to think through was the parents' revolt is also a revolt against the fake gay rights movement, because there was never really a movement that had something to do with things called rights. This was, are their relationships such that it makes sense to have them on family insurance policies, which this was one of the things, is that if you were like me, where you were raised around gay people and you had seen people like for decades, and you had worked in the working class, so you got to see people at like the super normal types of people, that it's like, and then finally what it was is I listened to, okay, so why do people on the right have an objection to this? And so there was a few people who had these kind of like not so really sensible ones. It was kind of a lot of hot air. But there was one in particular, I'm not going to say who this guy is, because anybody who's on the kind of the far right, of this writer and publisher. He has a publishing company, and he's probably one of the people who has nailed out of the park the LGBTQ thing in a major way, like to the point where he just makes you kind of sick to your stomach when he starts going into this stuff, where he goes into like, so what are the differences, and where he's really like, no, they're significantly different. And it was very rational. He didn't even, the first time I ever heard him say all this stuff, he was so dry and so rational. He's not always dry and rational. He'll put in spicy words. He'll use the spicy gamer words and stuff. But he started getting into the significant differences, like where he's like, no. Demographically, when you look at health-wise and everything, these people behave significantly differently. Most people just, for some reason, will not pay attention to the statistics on this. Now, this was true. This was something that I knew from where I grew up, doing 10-key data entry for Planned Parenthood records. I knew, yes, gay men have entirely different sexual behaviors than straight men. That straight men, there's a reason straight men call it getting lucky, because it is getting lucky, and that that there's no data otherwise, that straight men get very little sex, and it's this thing of that no data says otherwise in our country. It is just some weird, there's kind of this thing in our culture of this sort of rumor that like men are cheered on for getting sexual partners, and women are shamed and blah blah blah. Nobody knows when women have sexual partners other than all of our friends, because women love talking about their sexual partnerships with their friends. This is something that and men don't get this. It is when you have a male friend who shares intimate information about his sexual couplings, it is weird. It's very, very weird. I think most men have had some situation, usually it's somewhere in your 20s, where you have a friend who just tells you way too much about something he did with somebody, and you're kind of like thinking like, you didn't want to know this about your friend, or you didn't want to know this about this woman, like, because you're going to see her again with him. And you're like, dude, why did you tell me this? Like, come on, rein it in, bro. And so, yeah. So, and some guys, there's some kind of, like, some subcultures that, no, they're all about talking about how, oh man, I do this with my genitals all the time, and this woman, and oh man, my fucking cock, dude, And you're just like, what is wrong with some motherfuckers? What? Um, really? Like, people don't keep it to themselves? Like, it's not between you and your lady? Like, don't you have other shit to talk about, bro? So there's, overall, though, the stats hold up. About 20% of men are getting 80% of the sex. So it really is that women are choosing these outcomes. That's the candid part. When it comes to dating and to coupling, when it comes to all of our society and how the environment really is, women are choosing it. If people are killing each other in the streets, giving each other AIDS, women are choosing it. They enjoy this outcome. They like this world the way it is. Nobody wants to deal with that's the way that animals work. The women decide on the environment in which they will bear offspring. They have decision-making power through the ballot box. They're the overwhelming number of college graduates, and they can't improve the world worth a shit. But the other part of this is this kind of weird fascination that women, now that they don't have children, have with homosexuality, and kind of living vicariously through these people who have no way of getting pregnant, which is really the big thing. A lot of straight women who, especially the sort of the more not worthy of marriage types, pretty party girls who partied with gay men. And I've known many women who they had their time where they were a handbag, and they're just being carried around by some bevy of gay men. So when so what a big part of that with the Parents' Revolt is that the homosexuals think that they have some weird special liberties, that they are some special group that can teach the young about homosexuality, and then because all the time they're being indoctrinated with heterosexuality, it's an indoctrination, that if they had the choice, what would they really choose? If they really knew how good it was to have sex with a person like me. That's really what it comes across as. It doesn't matter how homosexuals think about it. That's what a whole lot of dads are hearing. I'm trying to convince your child that if they had a chance with me, how awesome would that be? Being that I'm an authority figure in their life. I'm this full-grown adult discussing my sexual activities with a fucking child. That's what now. So this very idea of the special liberties of the blacks to commit crime, the special liberties of Hispanics to just come in the country and never follow the rules, that's also starting to now apply with immigrants from the Islamic world and from Africa. But one of the key ones, though, is that the homosexuals have some special sex liberty that they get to try to recruit children. And it has to be said because that's what it appears to be. I mean, you would actually have to be going out of your way, being a little thick-headed, being a little dense and naive to think that that's not what's going on. And it actually has to be this type of something that balances candor, and that's charity, that it would have to be exceedingly charitable. And most of Americans, these good European descendants, they've been extremely charitable. Now, also a big part of this comes from, you can't blame mom for having a broken vagina. This is something that really is hard, I think, for a lot of people, that it's maybe your mom was broken. Maybe you came out of a woman with a broken ass vagina. There's a lot of people that they can't handle that idea. You know, you chose dad. You're pissed about how things came out, but it's it's your broken fucking, your broken mom. This, and there's no going back. And a lot of, it's only Aaron Clary who's been one of these people who's really tried to make people confront, like, how well, Stefan Molyneux did as well, really. I gotta say that. Stefan Molyneux has, to some degree. Jordan Peterson has done this, where he's sort of mapped out, like, no, you do have to kind of take on this idea of, like, of who your parents are and separating yourself from your parents. There has to be a right of doing so in a person's individual life, because we no longer have a tribal right of, say, cleansing the boy of his mother's sort of mom energy, which is, all males have to be cleansed of the, like, say, it'll be cleansed of, like, the mother's milk that's still in them, or there'll be things done like that, and it's because of the inherent tie to the menstrua and the taboo nature of the menstrua, and that a male warrior has to be separated from these things, has to fully become a man. And I know there's a lot of, like, this thing, oh, they're afraid of our powerful menstrua, and stuff like that. I know that that's kind of one of the ideas, that like a feminist would have, but it's just that it's taboo, yes, it is powerful, but that's the whole point. Its power is good and bad, and yeah. That's it, that's the thing. It's good and bad. That's why Moses thinks that he can tame the spirit that is at the top of the mountain in a burning bush by knowing its name, and instead is humbled and made to take his shoes off. The thing, it doesn't react the way. It didn't react to typical magic, where you get the spirit's name and then you could control it. It's like the spirit's name is elusive, and then on top of it, the spirit then tells them, "Then take your damn shoes off." So, see, having some kind of understanding of why that story is important, that's human wisdom. And that kind of human wisdom takes a long time to study and to find out about. Holy crap, this whole area is just lousy with fucking traffic right now. I'm, like, desperately trying to find just sidewalks or some place to walk without hella people or hella cars. So this special liberty that now, because you see, this is also the thing of, in many societies, the happy rainbow people have been at some point some kind of almost like magical group, because they didn't fit in any one group. This is, alluded to, but from the time where you start getting then a society where the men have any form of wealth in the form of farm animals that they could pass on in a marriage, and they can make money from. A group like this has less and less and less import, because they don't breed, and they're not really a part of the breeding process, and they're not really necessarily important to any kind of magical right that matters anymore, because the ability to grow food and the ability to do things starts becoming less and less of a case of magic as it starts becoming technique of some kind of early form of engineering or science. So that's like a part of the kind of the magical world dying as people figure out how to measure things. So the having some group that's sort of this two-spirit group that has special ideas or images or something, and so it was once I started to understand, like, no, this right-winger was getting into these people have grossly different sexual norms. This is the rate of how they spread sexual disease among one another. The men very different than the women were, and then the women, here's what they say about, do they even have sex? Like, do the women even have sex with one another? How healthy are their relationships? Well, what are the outcomes? You start looking at, okay, well, this woman stayed married to her husband and they had multiple children, and this is what their long-term outcomes were. Much better than a very large number of the gender Americans and the genital Americans and their outcomes. Their outcomes were significantly worse. When you look at the outcome of women, we've had to study why is it gender American women have such problems with weight, and like that they're almost always ahead of the curve, so to speak, when it comes to fatness. That straight women have to catch up to them. The homosexual men are extremely likely to have inordinate numbers of partners, like nothing like straight men would have. 10, 100 times the number of partners straight men would have. Very, very likely to have STDs. That's a community that leads in that. It's there's this sort of like this mythology that somewhere in some cities there's a bunch of young people that aren't taught about the things they'll catch. That's not true. That hasn't been true for like over 100 years. It's just this weird myth that like women love telling people because their parents told them, you'll get the herp if you fuck around. No, her parents didn't tell her she was going to get the herp. She was a little slut, and she, so that's it. That's the way the whole world works. But no, in major cities with a kind of a section that will have like where the homosexuals drink a lot and the men go to seedy hotels, that you'll find they have that's also where the clinics are. That's where all the herpes clinics and all the sexual disease clinics are. It's where all the in the dead center of the city, heavy urbanized area where all the gay men live. And so in once this guy pointed out, because I had seen all this, I had seen it, I had lived there, I had dealt with the data, I had entered the data, but it didn't quite occur to me how different this was between straight and gay people, and that of how drastically different their sexual norms their sexual norms and life outcomes were. And so when people want to ask, like, so where do people get such a horrible idea about the gay community? And it's like, well, okay, now I had to be candid about this is where this comes from. That this is the deal, like that there's solid data on this, that there's no way around. And that not only is there no way around it, we've actually studied this such that this has been something the left studied and is written about. That's how I knew about it. And it was only until somebody on the right put it in their perspective. These aren't people who are liberated from something. These are irresponsible hedonists. And this has nothing to do with loving love, with all the love feelings. No, these are just a bunch of dudes fucking each other in the ass, giving each other diseases. And these possibly kind of mentally ill, high testosterone, quasi-autistic women that, will never be happy. Like their brains don't work in a way that they could really be kind of happy unless they're around horses and cats a lot. Yeah, and apparently trying to possibly get in the pants of young women, which and that one came from the big list. And the big list was one of these things that once you find it, you can never look away. And it gets into all of these basically gay women who work in schools who were caught molesting kids, and that this is a part of the world of molesters and chomos and such that we will not discuss. We won't discuss all these nice, like, kind of round head white girls who are sick for kids, and so that's yeah. And at one time I didn't believe any of this. That was the whole deal. Oh, look at the ginger cat. Hello, kitty. Oh no, you don't want to be petted. Okay, that's fine. And yeah, but once somebody brought up things that one I didn't know about, and that I was like, okay, and this was source documents, like the right likes to do. The right likes to be like, here's source documents, here's the links back to the original crime reports, and because I had gotten to hear all this from the perspective of the community, where I got to hear it from their point of view, where they were making a lot of excuses. They weren't being candid. And that when you would actually be around these people and you would hear them speak candidly about things, you realize, okay, no, this is very much kind of bilingual. That there's a way that the community likes to talk to people on the outside in one language, but then speaks to their own in another. And yeah, and yeah, let's just put it that way. That's a yeah. But so and so that's the reality of it. In a candid fashion, that's the reality I saw of it. And that it leaves me, I'm actually at this point where I'm kind of stuck, because there's people I've known who they just did, and it didn't matter to me any of this, who they're fucking. It just didn't, because whatever we were doing, that didn't matter. There was nothing. There was nothing going on about it. This person's not dancing or not acting outrageous. But then there's the people who it's obviously, no, something's fucking wrong with you, boy. Boy, you're fucked up. Like, you need to stop acting like people give a shit about all this dancing queen shit going through your head. Like, nobody gives a fuck about your sass mouth, You're a fat round head, just shut the fuck up and get the fucking job done. And, sassy boy, whatever, and this ain't a disco, and you're not a DJ. And so I kept running into this kind of behavior, or the women who hate men, and that really, and like nothing more, nothing less, really, that's kind of how the person's rolling, and so that was, yeah, and that's the way it not only came to see it, but I mean, just more and more people are seeing it now. There's not a way back from this. Too many people see this now. It's too clear. It's too obvious to people. Like, yeah, I was there in the 90s. I remember how these people talk once you have a few drinks in them compared to how they talk when they're discussing their genitalia in some polite manner and why all the kids should know about it in school. Yeah. Because, you can't even allude remotely to it. Yeah. Let's just say that. All right. Gotta get in touch with somebody, play a little of my game, do a little studying later.